Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of All Things MSP Live. This is the Wednesday night live stream. This is where we talk about just about anything as long as it relates to running an IT services business, being in an IT services business. We've done all kinds of crazy things on this show, but we always want to provide content that's important to you, the listeners. And now I'm live on something over here, so I got to go mute that. Hold on. So that was the YouTube channel. So I know we're live on YouTube. Let me go ahead and put a comment in there just to make sure that our comments are live. All right, that comment's live. Okay. Let me just refresh LinkedIn here. And mute that, of course. So, yep, we're live on LinkedIn. And so we only have one more to check. And yes, we are live on Facebook. So let me go ahead and make sure that comments are working on Facebook. There we go. That's working. And last but not least, LinkedIn. We have the trifecta. What can I say? I'm getting better at this every time. We're only down to 3 minutes and 10 seconds. So every time I'm having to fill this space because the technology is working, which is absolutely awesome. All right, so a couple of announcements tonight before we get to the show. Number one is if you have not checked out our new Office Hours series. Now, Office Hours, we just started. We published the first one last Wednesday. They'll probably come out every Wednesday. I haven't settled on that day. You know, the podcast comes out on Tuesday. Wednesday's been Office Hours for the past 2 weeks. First we did Evo Security. So we did a webinar for Evo Security. And then the one that came out today, earlier this morning, was with Actually a Podcast, with Kelsey and Morgan from Actually a Podcast. And that session was on how to start a podcast. Because one of the things that I think is important is always getting your message out there as a business owner, right? And so one of the ways that we can do that is through podcasts. And I'll just give you a little preview of one of the things that Morgan and Kelsey said. And they said they were thinking about doing like a YouTube channel or some videos or something like that. But they decided to do a podcast because that's what they do. That's what they listen to in their spare time. And they wanted to reach people who were like them. Now, if you look at this from a marketing standpoint, you may want to reach people who aren't like you if you're not listening to podcasts. So podcasts, they're relatively easy to do. I won't spoil too much from the webinar from the Office Hours. Go ahead, go to the YouTube channel, check it out. You'll find it there. And by the way, while you're on the YouTube channel, make sure you like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all of the YouTube-y type things. And I'm sure Kelsey and Morgan will appreciate you throwing a like on that video as well. All right, another thing real quick, CompTIA ChannelCon is coming up August 1st and 3rd. So if you have not registered yet and you do want to go, just go ahead and go to the CompTIA website. You'll find ChannelCon, I'm sure. It's the biggest event of the year for them. You can use the code EANTH23 to register for free. And then all you got to do is get there and have a place to stay, because you don't really want to, sleep on the streets of Vegas in August. Trust me. And as another PSA related to that, because I've done it, so, this is from experience, do not wear Crocs in Vegas during the summer months, because they will melt to the concrete. So anyway, I will be at ChannelCon. I hope you're going to be at ChannelCon. I've got a whole session on how to map a customer experience journey to the business that you want to have. And so I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of great information, and it's going to be just a fun time, because ChannelCon always is. We hit the 000. Let's do this thing. Hey everybody, welcome back to another All Things MSP Live, the Wednesday live stream event where we talk about anything that we can get a guest for that relates to the managed services or the IT services business, because we want to not only cover the technical, because we're all technical people, we like technical stuff, right? But there's another side to it. There's another side to being in business and running an IT services company. And one of those things is mental health and wellness. And it's an important topic that's come up a lot recently, especially in the last couple of years, because we've dealt with the pandemic. We've dealt with work from home. We've dealt with cyber threats and things that just happen. And, I can go back to my own experiences as an MSP owner and say, yeah, it can be pretty stressful when the only phone calls you get are the phone calls where something's broken and you've got to fix it right away. So with me tonight, I have a new guest, and his name is Edward Curtis. He is an active law enforcement officer with 20 years of experience. In his current role, he's a shift supervisor in the patrol division, answering calls for service and community relations. He's a certified trainer through the Municipal Police Officers Training Commission, and he works with a lot of letters in this acronym. I'm not even going to try and do it. Designing training for the statewide police officer certification classes. He's an adjunct instructor for the HACC Police Academy. He serves on the Cumberland, Dauphin, and York Critical Incident Stress Management teams, working as both a therapist and a peer support officer. Previously, he's worked as a probation officer with York County Probation, where he was easy for me to say, where he was the use of force instructor. He's also graduated with a Master of Social Work and works as a licensed grief and trauma therapist. He's trained in eye movement desensitization. I think we're going to ask him about that maybe. Reprocessing therapy. He's got a bachelor's degree in history and political science from the University of Pittsburgh at Bradford. He's been married for 28 years and has 3 daughters. And I got 3 years on you, just 3 years, but 28, that's a great, great accomplishment. So without further ado, everybody give it up for Ed Curtis.
Hey, how you doing, Eric?
Good. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Like I said, kind of in the opening, this is something that there's been a lot of talk about in our industry around mental health, because I don't want to compare it to first responder type stresses, right? Because those are next level. But as stressful, situations and businesses go, I think based on my own experience, IT can be pretty stressful. And then you throw in the pandemic, you throw in cyber threats, and it's kind of a whole new ball game out there.
It really is. It's really, I've noticed just, since the pandemic, it has just really changed how people have related to each other. Having that moment where you're isolated, you're in your own homes, you're getting out either, by talking to people, FaceTime, social media, that kind of thing. But to have the actual interactions with people has really suffered. And I think even after the pandemic, people struggled on what those interactions will look like now that we're coming out of it. Can I handshake somebody again? Can I give somebody a hug? I mean, these are the confusing points that we were having coming out and interrelating again. And that all leads to affecting our connectedness and affecting in turn, our mental health.
Yeah. And, for me as an introvert, I actually did pretty well being told to stay home during the pandemic. So it's hard for me to relate kind of to some of the people who are maybe more extroverted, or just their personalities lend themselves to really craving that personal interaction face to face that they weren't getting. What are some of the effects that you've seen from that type of lack of interaction?
I think first of all is that connectiveness. It's like, how are we going to relate to each other now? People got used to being in their homes. People got used to just being able to do a FaceTime call or a social media post, and that was enough to be able to reach out to somebody and check in. Texting has really changed how we relate to each other now. So we don't hear inflection, we don't hear our voices. So coming out of the pandemic, it's like, what are our social circles look like now? Working has changed a little bit. So instead of going back to the office, a lot of people are still working from home. And I think people had an expectation to a point of getting back to the sense of normal or getting back to where we were. I think we're still trying to figure out what that was. And when it comes to like anxiety, you have this window of tolerance that, you can operate within this level, right? When the pandemic happened, we hit the roof of that tolerance. So then when things started happening, we were just bumping right up over. And instead of it being something that we could handle in our daily lives, then it all of a sudden became a crisis to us. And it's trying to figure out lowering that level of tolerance now that we can get back so that these out of the ordinary things do not affect us as much. And we're not feeling as anxious all the time.
So for people, because I know you kind of mentioned it, we're still coming out of that, right? There are still a lot of people working from home. A lot of people got comfortable working from home. And now we're kind of in this space where some employers are making people come back. Some are permanently work from home. So has that created a weird dynamic as well?
I think it has. I mean, in May of this year, the Department of Health has now come out and said that the new epidemic is loneliness. So, people are lonely, so when you're at home, yeah, you're on meetings, you're on Zoom calls and whatever, video conferencing you have, and you're making those connections, but they're not the same connections as if you're sitting beside somebody in an office, if you're sitting across from somebody at a meal. So you're kind of losing some of these connections that these informal subtle body, how we communicate with each other subtly that way. So you're missing some of that. So people are still trying to figure that out. And of course it is, there's this idea of the reality of, well, I'm saving on fuel, I'm saving on my commute, but is it worth missing out on that face-to-face connection, actually interacting with people? And I think we got so used to not having that, we don't realize what we're missing at this point.
Yeah, because I think that there is a lack of connection. There's something you can't get by a Zoom call, right? Because like right
Mm-hmm.
now, I'm talking with my hands, but you can't see it.
Right.
And
Yes.
and
Yeah.
so and you mentioned texting before creates kind of that disconnect as well. And so, Zoom call is somewhere in the spectrum between those two, right? Texting is the
Mm-hmm.
extreme, being in person is the other end of the extreme because you get all the senses involved, right? And so it's an interesting dynamic to me, really.
Yeah. So it kind of reminded me in the 1970s, there was this experiment where moms would interact with their babies. Okay. And it was called the still face experiment. And what they would do is they would interact with their babies and, respond to their facial expressions. And then in the next phase, they would do still face. They would not express themselves at all. And then they would go back to expressing it. And you could just see, if you go online, go on YouTube and stuff like that with that still face experiment, you'd see how the babies react to not getting this interaction back. And I kind of relate that to being like in a large conference, because when I was in school, we were doing Zoom classes, right? And you're basically watching TV, and we don't watch the TV like you and I are talking, where we go, oh, that's interesting. Oh, look at what's happening. You're just sitting here watching it like that. So,
Yeah.
it's like, so you're not getting that reaction. So the person is speaking, it's almost like that still face experiment, so we're not getting that interaction.
Yeah. So let's kind of talk a little bit more specifically about, IT and
Okay.
the stress of being in the IT business. And by the way, I want to go ahead and recognize Degley is here. Degley's a regular here on the live stream. And by the way, everybody who's been wondering when I was going to get Degley on the live stream, he's coming. We're setting it up. We've got most of the details worked out. I think we've got a great segment coming up for that. And I think I want to start this with kind of a personal story. A lot of the audience knows I ran a break fix in an MSP business for almost 20 years, close to 18. And uh, when I switched to the vendor side, it's much better now. But when I first switched to the vendor side, I I had PTSD when this thing would ring, right? When my phone would ring, I had, I had a physical reaction to it because as a business owner in IT, most of the time people didn't call me unless it was a problem. And they didn't call me, especially after hours, right? If it was nights or weekends, it was an emergency. And so I still to this day have a little bit of PTSD around that because that's just kind of the environment we're in, to the point where I've kind of solved this for myself, right? When the Apple Watch came out, I said, okay, let me try making that vibrate instead of hearing a ring, and sure enough, that has pretty much solved the problem. So, I guess my question for you is, have you talked to other IT providers? Have they described similar situations, and how do you kind of compare the stress in the IT business to maybe your typical office job?
So, when you're saying you get that physical reaction to that phone ringing, that is a trauma response. So, basically what's happening in that instance that you're hearing that phone ring and you're feeling the butterflies, you're feeling the increased heart rate, maybe increased breathing, that's your body actually dropping chemicals in and saying, oh, I either have a fight on my hands or I want to get the heck out of here. I don't want to deal with it. It's fight or flight. And although our brains have changed as much with so much technology, our biology is not. We're still in those caveman days of that's the reaction. It's fight or flight. So whatever that trauma response is, whether it's a phone ringing, a certain person calling, remembering a bad accident. So whenever you go into that intersection, you have that response. So it doesn't matter what the trauma is. You're not saying that well, this is trauma because it's a lot worse. No, it's that response that you're trying to alleviate the symptoms of. So when it comes to that, one of the things I do is called EMDR therapy. We were talking about that in the open, and it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And part of what that is getting rid of that physical reaction that comes with trauma. And so when you look at this trauma, like this phone ring, you can develop a picture in your mind of saying this phone ring is affecting me. Well, why is it affecting you? Is it because you feel like you're going to be powerless to fix the problem? Is it feel like you don't have a sense of control? Is it that, you don't know what the response is going to be, right? So then you deal with that. Okay. And then you can do this eye movement, which is basically, it's almost like simulating REM sleep. Okay. And REM is how we organize our day. Like when we dream at night. And when it came out, Francine Shapiro had gotten a little tangent here. She got diagnosed with cancer. She went on a walk and she felt better. And she was like, why? Well, she was looking around, looking at the trees, seeing the forest, and that eye movement kind of relaxed her. It's you think about coddling a baby, rocking a baby. Okay. So it's along those lines. So what you do is you develop that, you narrow down what that negative cognition is. And then when you develop this positive cognition. So I'm sure over the years, when you've gotten those phone calls, you've been able to handle the problem, right? It's only that first reaction of, oh crap, but then you get down to business, you're able to do it. So it's taking those positive cognitions, all those positive experiences and saying, this is what the reality is. This, I can move forward in this. And when I hear that phone ring, I'm going to think about these positive reactions I've had rather than the negative. Because, it's just our amygdala actually stores negative experiences faster than it stores positive ones. Because the negative is what we learned from, right? The mistakes, those bad things. So the amygdala, as soon as you hear that phone ring, oh, this is a bad experience, but it's changing that mindset of this can be a positive experience. I've experienced positive experiences out of that. And that's how you get through that. You don't forget about the trauma. You don't forget about the bad things, but it doesn't give you that physical reaction.
Yeah, I'm glad to say that I don't have that physical reaction anymore.
Good.
It's just time and coping, right? I've figured out how
Yes.
to cope with it, and that's helped. I also believe that meditation is key in my personal journey in dealing with anxiety and things like that. Um, I don't know. It just seems to level set me.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. We talked about like lowering those levels. That's what meditation, it's what mindfulness can do. Because with this, with being part of an ISP, that system is constantly running. Whether you're working on the system, whether you're there, and you're not there, that system's going. So I'm sure that in your mind, it's like, what's going on when I'm not there? It's hard to really fully unplug, let go, and not anticipate a problem, right? So that's where mindfulness, meditation, taking this, a lot of times we do like the four square breathing, like in for four, hold for four, out for four.
Hmm.
Just that can kind of just settle things down and and give you that sense of just kind of relaxing, settle down to your base. I read an article just the other day about the health effects of a good sigh, like when you sit down in your chair and you're just like, And I instantly thought about my dog. My dog will just cuddle up next to me on the couch and he just lets out that sigh. I'm like, that dog's got it. He knows how to settle himself down, be mindful, and just let go of everything, and we have to kind of get ourselves in that mode sometimes too.
So now what I can do is I can tell my wife, who basically she gets on me for sighing. She's like, "What's wrong now?" And I'm like, "Nothing." And so I can just tell her, "I'm just relieving stress."
I'm letting go. That's the thing. It's just like, this is not pain. This is relief.
Yeah, yeah. So, the IT side of it is one thing, right? Always kind of expecting a disaster, expecting
Yeah.
the server to crash, expecting there to be ransomware. There's those things that come with being in IT. But there's also, for a lot of this audience, they're IT business owners. And so there's a whole nother level of stress that comes with being the person responsible for the whole thing. Not only your own paycheck, but everybody else's paycheck, right? And
Yeah.
so in the land of business owners, is there anything that you have seen, would recommend, works well, to help them cope and properly deal with all of the extra stuff that gets added on from that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, in my part-time life, I'm a therapist. So I think talk therapy can really be beneficial. And even in the therapist world, they say the best therapist has their own therapist. So talking through things, having that person that, it doesn't necessarily have to be a therapist, but, having that person you can kind of talk through things, talk through the pressures. It's getting out of your own head. And just like you have that 24/7 idea of running your business and just the business end of it, staying on track and, anticipating emergencies. That's a 24/7 thing being a business owner too. It's not like it goes away when you're on vacation because you're thinking what's going on. You're responsible. You're the go-to person. So what can that look like? And it's finding those times where we can just kind of let go, whether it be an hour break somewhere and again, it's like a workout. It's you don't go to the gym and lift 500 pounds, right? You go to the gym, you start out, you do a quick 20-minute workout, low weights. That's what meditation is. That's what mindfulness is getting into that slowly, building, and you build up that idea of relaxing and kind of desensitizing and again lowering that anxiety level down. I just recently caught up. I just started watching Billions, and it's funny how many how many episodes where it shows those two guys just sitting there being mindful. They actually have scenes with I'm like, oh, there it is. Even those guys do it. So I think it's funny they even sneak that in that show.
Yeah, and I think it's great that we're, as a society, we're being more open about mental health, and we're approaching mental health from the same way in some cases that we approach physical health, right? Not just from a fix it with medicine kind of thing, but with your physical health, you got to look at your exercise. You got to look at what you're eating. So with mental health, I'm sure that like the meditation, there are exercises that we can do, and that there are things that we should be putting in, as well as taking out. Um,
Hmm.
you know, and those are just a layman's kind of way for me to explain that. Uh, Apply some of your expert knowledge in
So,
information.
so for me, when I'm talking to clients that are really feeling anxious, depressed, we start out really slow. I like, sometimes we'll do some like, CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy of, I just want you to go outside for 10 minutes. Get yourself out in the sun. Get some vitamin D inside. Go for a walk, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Taking yourself out. Those cell phones. I mean, putting those down, getting away from those. The social media that feeds into negativity. Like we talked earlier about how our brain grabs onto negativity. Well, social media people know that, that they grab on. That's what our brains are looking for. That confirmation of, yeah, this what you disagree with. So separating yourself from the phone. I was talking to someone the other day who talked about how they had 76 text messages, and I was like, wow, it's not even that you're on your phone. Your phone is actually chasing you. And trying to figure out those priorities. What's important right now. And really staying in the present of, what do I need to be doing now? Do I need to be spending time with family? Do I need to be spending time with work? Do I need to be spending time just with me doing some activity or something that I have a passion for that I can kind of just separate from those things? But figuring out those priorities, and at the end of the day, time's finite. We cannot find time. We only have so much. So what's going to be the important thing that you're going to utilize that time for?
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, I'm a technical guy. I'm an engineer at heart and by
Mm-hmm.
training. So I like to find hacks for things, right? And I've
Right.
done that to do a lot of those things. Like one of the things that you mentioned was getting outside, getting sunlight. Uh, One of the first things I do in the morning as soon as the sun comes up is I actually take a 1 mile walk, at about a 17-minute pace,
Mm-hmm.
or a little bit less, but I mean the pace doesn't matter. What I'm doing is I'm getting outside. I'm getting outside of the house and getting sunlight in my eyes, and that makes a huge difference to my entire day. I mapped it for about a week, and it's so obvious it's not even funny. And then on my phone, like literally, I have it set so that I don't get interrupted by a lot of things after 8 p.m. After 8
Mm-hmm.
p.m., it's pretty much silence unless it's one of my kids, my wife, my parents. That's it. You call me after 8, you're getting voicemail.
Yeah.
And same thing for like text notifications and things like that. I can still go look for them if I want to, but I don't have to. And then the other one is, inbox to zero is another one,
Okay.
because inbox to zero, I don't get that little red number there in the corner, right? Once I've
Yeah.
cleaned it up, number goes to zero, it disappears. I don't have to worry about it. And I just make sure that I revisit it a couple times a day to keep it under control.
Yeah, those are three very good ways of kind of keeping setting boundaries for yourself, and especially the walks in the morning. Again, we talked earlier about that caveman stuff. That's biology. That's your body. That's getting outside as you're telling your body, hey, it's daytime. It's time to start. Waking up, getting the sleep out of the system, and getting those chemicals going to take on your day. So yeah, that's all very good stuff to kind of give you balance and really keep those levels down. You're starting at a lower level. You're starting out with some exercise, moving around. That's lowering that anxiety down. That you can start building it into your day as you're experiencing things.
Yeah, and there are chemical reasons there too. And I'm going to go ahead and put Degley's comment back up here. Mental health days are becoming more common, which is great. But you're right, Degley. There are a lot of people who still aren't comfortable taking them because we're still transitioning out of that. What people think about mental health. But Ed, are you seeing people, like more people taking advantage of that? More people forcing themselves to take those days because Their brain needs it, not just their body.
Yeah, it's like, again, it's like I would hope that people would start taking these days earlier, before they get to that point where they're just, I just can't even cope anymore. That's when you're taking the day, and I've talked to people that like work from home online, and and especially with like they talk about it too with like unlimited time off, that people actually almost take less time because they don't want to be that person that's taking advantage of the system. So, it's just there's just trying to figure out, and I think it really needs to come from employ. I'm glad to see more employers are saying mental health, and
Yeah.
employing, like bringing yoga in and having timeout rooms and meditation rooms, those kinds of things that, they're seeing that if you can give people that break, they're going to be more productive. You're
Yes.
not giving them a chance to blow stuff off. So, yeah, I think it's important, but I think it's also important too that, like sick time. We wait till we're like sick as a dog before we take that day off, and then it takes more time to recover. Same thing with our mental health. If we're starting to feel that stress, figuring that out early so that we're not waiting until the last minute till it's just totally out of hand, and then we just are really having a hard time functioning.
Yeah. And, I don't want to take this in too dark a direction, but I feel like this is a topic that needs to be discussed when we're talking about IT, and that's the cyber threat angle of this. Because, I know business owners who have had to deal with this. I know, people who, there's lots of stories about people who have become severely, um, you know, mentally in a deep, deep hole, um, after dealing with cyber threats, because it's a 24/7 engagement, uh, very little sleep, very hard on your physical body, and even worse, probably on your mental aptitude. So, have you seen anything when it comes to the increase in cyber threats and the increase in mental health issues among the practitioners who are dealing with those situations?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, in these instances, it just comes down to this idea of fear of what's coming next, what's anticipating, where it's going to come from, how it's going to look, and it's just changing so much all the time. How the people are going in and attacking. What are they looking for? Are they looking for information? Are they looking to shut down your system? And yeah, it's a 24-hour, 7-day a week idea that I think you can just get into this loop of constantly thinking, and when you start ruminating on these things, just it turns into that circle pattern, and that's where the fear develops, because when you're not in the present, when you're fearful of the future, that's when anxiety starts cropping up, because you start to think, you know 5 minutes from now, I don't know what's going to happen, right? I mean, I don't know. I could get up and do whatever, so the future is very short as to what we can actually predict, and that can be very debilitating to people all the time. So keeping themselves in the present, doing that mindfulness meditation. Sometimes what we do, a very good exercise, when people are feeling anxious, is what I do is I just take point out three things in a room that are yellow, point out three things in a room that are rectangle. That can, when our minds are just kind of jumping all over the place, that can bring us back to, all right, this is where I am, this is what's happening, this is safe, and then you can start going after that problem again. Because at the end of the day, when you're talking about cyber threats and stuff, you're not going to reduce the problem by reducing your anxiety. What you're doing is you're increasing your capability of handling the problem. So being able to step away from it, refocus, reset, and then come back to it gives you the ability to look at that problem in a different way. So allowing yourself to do that, allowing yourself that I don't have to stay in this all the time. I can step away from it, and that's going to help me attack it better later.
Yeah, and that's good advice. Now, one of the things that I've kind of struggled with in trying to figure out is, with my physical health, it's pretty easy to recognize when I'm not doing things right. I gain
Mm-hmm.
weight, my blood pressure goes up, I don't have as much energy. What are some of the things that we can look for in terms of our mental health to kind of get an idea? Oh, we need to start meditating more. We need to start, maybe going to see a therapist. What are some of the things that we should be on the lookout for to catch it early?
So what happens was when, mind, body, and spirit, when they're not connected, if you're not dealing with your mental health, it will come out in other ways. It will come out that you're having heart palpitations or shortness of breath. You might start having physical health problems. People that have experienced a lot of trauma are more apt to have physical problems than people that haven't, because it's just the way it manifests, that your body is trying to process it. So it'll come out in other ways, increased blood pressure, increased heart problems, weight gain, weight loss. So any of those things, it's when it starts impeding with your daily functioning. It's like you hear a lot of I used to be able to go out and do this. I used to be able to call my friends. I used to be able to get to work without having a panic attack. So when you start having these things, when you start feeling your norm fall off, that maybe that something's, that you just are, instead of getting out of bed and doing stuff on a Saturday, you're just sleeping all day. And, and it's catching that stuff early. It's just like any health problem. The earlier you catch that health problem, the easier it is to be able to treat it and then move on. You think about like a knee injury. You can go in, you can get the physical therapy and get that knee back and straight. But if you don't do that, you just let it fester, then you're talking surgery, and it's a lot longer time to recover. So anything that you're just seeing off the norm, and it can be emotional too. If you're feeling like you're snapping at people more, you're just not getting along, or things are bothering you that didn't bother you before, that could be a sign of that something else is going on mentally that you're not dealing with or coping with, or just trying to kind of push down to be able to cope with other areas of your life.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight, because I'm looking to start doing this myself, is journaling. And you talking through those things just made me think, like, a lot of times we weigh ourselves. So we're looking at the physical. Maybe we even check our blood pressure. I do at least probably once a week. And, we go to the doctor, every year for a checkup. But we don't really necessarily do that for our mental health. And so, I'm actually looking at journaling as a possible solution, so that I'm seeing these things sooner. So before I start being snappy at home, before I start being argumentative at work, maybe this is something that I'll identify through journaling. So first of all, what kind of successes have you seen around journaling, and what methods of journaling would you recommend to help with all of this?
So at the end of the day, journaling is what works for you. So whether it's writing stuff down, some people will cut out an article that they see and put that as part of their journal. Basically, what journaling does is, when you're in a thought cycle and you're trying to solve a problem or work through a problem, a lot of times our thoughts start becoming circular. So it becomes, it's just like you're just running this loop in your mind. What journaling can do, it allows you to write that stuff down and actually show progress. You can actually see the problem on paper, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't. And again, it's training. So starting out with 5 minutes every couple days, just writing something down, a thought, something that happened to you. That's how you do it. The hardest day to journal is the day after you skipped a day, right? Because you're like, oh, I skipped a day, and I'm just out of sync and blah blah blah. But get right back in it. And the clients that are really good at journaling can look back and see not only what they were struggling with, but they can see their progress. And that's where they really see, they just say, man, I was really in a dark place there, writing this stuff out, and I see that I'm improving. So when you actually see that improvement, that's like stepping on the scale. That's seeing that weight go down, or that's seeing that bench press go up. You're seeing progress in your writing. And the hardest part too is that first page. How do I start this journal right? How do I get it right? And it's just basically, you just do it. You just start writing, and put that down there. And you think about, it's funny. One of the best books is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. What was that? It was his journal. And,
Hmm.
how many people have gotten
It's
benefit out of his
actually
own journal?
right there
Okay.
on the side table to my couch because
Yeah.
I just work through it periodically.
Right. And so, working through his journal, that's the same way we can work through our own journal, our own thought process, and see improvement and see where we were and what we were thinking. And yeah, and so it's very helpful. A lot of people find a good way to get their base and just to be able to show improvement and show thought process.
Well, and that's something I hadn't thought of. You put it in the context of like weighing yourself every day. And by weighing yourself every day, you get to see that progress, right?
Mm-hmm.
With
Mm-hmm.
mental health, it's a lot harder to quantify. But by writing it down and going back and reviewing that, I would see how you could actually see how that would improve or not improve in some cases.
Yeah.
And you also hit on another key, and I think that is journaling is what you make it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and do what feels right for you. I mean, for me, I think I have a problem with just too many ideas in my head going around all the time. That's why for me, a to-do list has changed my life. I mean, I started bullet journaling probably 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And although I have switched that bullet journal from paper to digital, um, it still works the same way because it's still handwriting and I'm getting it out of my head. But one of the things with journaling is there are things that aren't to dos that are still rambling around in there that I need to
Mm-hmm.
get out
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
I've processed them. And I think that's part of, for me, it's the processing that idea and either creating a to do or saying, nah, we're not going to worry about that one anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just so many different ways to do it.
Yeah, I looked at one person's journal and it was thoughts, it was experiences, it was actions, and then it was a grocery list. And then it was presents I'm buying for Christmas. And, and they tracked this journal. And when it came to Christmas next year, they're like, oh, let me look at my journal, and it's like, it's your life. That's your life, what you put down there and what's important to you. Again, in the present, what was your present then? What were you feeling? What were you thinking? What were your priorities?
Yeah, one of the things I started doing that kind of ties into this, and I started doing this, I mean, this is probably 20 years ago. The getting things done methodology,
Mm-hmm.
where you have a trusted system for getting things out of your head and into a system where it's going to then pop up at the appropriate time. And I
Yeah.
think for a lot of us who, especially those of us who are busy, who own businesses and things like that, that can be a key um, thing to reduce stress and anxiety is just knowing that you've gotten it out of your head, but trusting that it's going to pop up and be there at the time when you need it again.
Yeah, and as a business owner, it's important too, where you're trying to develop priorities. You can do that as part of your journal too. Of this is what's important to business. This is what's important to my home life. This is what's important to me as a worker in that business. And because a lot of times, being a business owner and working with it balls up. Everything spills into something else, right? And so it just becomes this jumbled up string of priorities. So by separating that out, and separating it out into like three, you talk about groups of three, right? Home, business owner, a business employee, those three priorities. And then what are the tasks within those priorities? It can really help you just kind of just pull apart all that string and really, get your priorities straight again.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, not to go into too much detail, but that's pretty much exactly what I do. I have 2 pages in my
Mm-hmm.
digital journal. One of them is what I want to do this year, what I want to do this quarter, what I want to do this month. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those are my big rocks. Separate it out. And by the way, there's 3 columns exactly like you described. I have my work life, I have my business life because I run the All Things MSP,
Mm-hmm.
community, and then I have my personal life. And so I have different sections for each of those. and then transition to my day. And then I have my day blocked out from 4 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night. Hopefully I don't have to use all those blocks. But that allows me to physically write down my schedule. And then on the other side of that page, I have what I want to do in work, business, and life that day. And then I have 3 sections below that for those corresponding things again, but they're what I want to get done that week. And I just bring those things from the week boxes up to the day boxes when it comes to the day that I want to actually get that done.
Yeah.
And by the way, if anybody's interested, I'm using GoodNotes. If you're interested in my templates, just let me know. I mean, because they're just PDFs, right? So they're easy to load in. If you're interested in those, just hit me up.
No, that sounds really good. I mean, it sounds like a great system, and so many people too, they get, it becomes so much about, they get bogged down in the system itself. So keeping that system simple, like you have, of being able to move things around and knowing exactly where things go, so it doesn't become the system itself doesn't become the burden, the cause of anxiety, because you can't figure out the system. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why nobody else's system ever worked for me. Like,
Right.
because the burden of the system was too much and it didn't work exactly the way I wanted it. So I designed my own. After using so many different ones over the years, I finally got to the point where, and that's, by the way, that's one of the reasons I switched to bullet journaling several years ago, was because it's a blank sheet of paper. It is what you make it, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I tried lots of different formats. The problem was I found myself rewriting it every day, because you can't just erase pen and move it around, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I was doing, that's one of the reasons I switched to digital. I think it was back in December of last year, is I can just copy and paste, and I can move these things. Like, I can move them from my monthly page to my weekly page. And if I know I'm not going to get it done this week, or I have to put it off for a couple of weeks, I can move it back to the monthly section.
Yeah.
So, it's really helped me a lot. And our friend Dawn is here. So I'm going to throw her comment up. GTD is great. I absolutely agree. That was a life changer for me. Having a to-do list, however works for you. Took me a while to figure out my specific to-do list. Block time. Dawn, yes, absolutely. I started time blocking probably only about 6 months ago. It was about the time, it was right after I switched to the digital journal, and time blocking works amazingly for me. I time block on the weekends, and it's that focus. It's the focus that she's talking about that it gives to me, because I think I am a little ADHD, and so time blocking, game changer for me.
And blocking in free time, not just what your tasks are. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not
I'm not
just
sure if that's where you're going with that.
Your work, it's blocking your life to make sure that you are setting aside the time to do the life things that you want to do as well.
Yep. And, she talked also about trying to stay on task, staying focused. I mean, that is one of the hardest things in our digital world, because that's constantly we're exposed to, is this constant changing. And the thing for me, and you've talked about it too, it's like, focus with cell phone, getting that cell phone to a point where, it's just not going to disturb you. That, some people use computers that aren't on the internet so that they can get work done. They're not distracted by, wanting to move on to something else. But it's really, we're so used to moving in this world now with these, you think about like TikTok and all these different things that are just boom, 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 boom with these dopamine hits, right? And so when we want to stay on task with something, it's not about staying on task for an hour. It's, like when we were younger, we could do that because we didn't have the distractions. But giving yourself a break, saying, if I can stay on this for 10, 15 minutes, taking a break, getting back into it, we should give ourselves some credit there for being able to do that. We just do not have, our world just doesn't function like it used to, where we could sit down for an hour and not think about other things. It's just our minds aren't there anymore to be able to do that. So giving ourselves some credit, saying, if we can do this for 10, 15 minutes, give this a good time thought, and then be able to step away, step back in, because again, once you start feeling those distractions, it's a loop. You're not going to be able to get yourself out of it. So it's step away, do some mindfulness techniques, meditation, step back in, and it's being able to transition out and back in that gives us that longer run of being able to concentrate on something.
Yeah, and if you don't think you have a problem with the constant interruptions of your cell phone, try meditating for 10 minutes.
Yep.
Because I bet you can't get through 5
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
getting distracted. Now it's okay, just bring yourself back,
Mm-hmm.
but it takes some discipline and some training, just like exercising, to get yourself to be able to meditate for a full 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like, in therapy sessions, the people are like, oh, I just feel like I'm always, always getting called on, and I just have all these distractions and everything. And the whole time we're in a session, it's beep, beep, boop, beep. They can't even shut it off for that 50 minutes of being able to have a therapy session, and have that conversation. So, yeah, it's very difficult in this society, and people don't even see that as a distraction now. They see it that, oh, I got to respond to this text. I got to respond to this email. It's because it's coming right to our front door. It's not like we leave home and somebody leaves a phone message and then we don't get that message till we're back home again, right? It's coming right to us. So you feel like this need to be able to respond to it right away. So, but that's the old guy in me.
Degley is making a good point here about time blocking. And because if we don't block our time, something else will fill that space. And if you've ever worked on something where you give yourself 2 hours to do it, and it really could have been a 15-minute job, I mean, we do it all the time. A task will fill the time that you give it. And if you give it an unlimited amount of time, you may not ever get it done. And so that's one of the things that really has helped me, especially on the weekends, because I have so much to do that, time blocking it, make sure not only do I get the tasks done that I need to get done, which is satisfying in its own right, but I make sure that I have the time to do the other things that other people want of me, or the things that I want to do, in my personal life.
Yeah, and I like what Degley says there too about, just picking up kids from school. Because how often do we do that? Well, they'll understand if I'm a couple minutes late because I had this thing I needed to just finish up. We kind of will, let other people, we think that people will just forgive us and, be able to stretch out that relationship there, that we can, it'll work. It'll be fine. I can just do this right now. And, that's where time blocking is very important too, because then we kind of bleed into other things. And especially when it comes to family and relationships that are important to us, that those are the things we can't bleed into.
Yeah. Because, well, back to, what is it? The Eisenhower matrix, where, urgent but not important suddenly, overrides the important but not urgent. And we really need to be living more in the important than just the urgent.
Yeah. It's so hard to figure that out and navigate it anymore too. It's really difficult. Yep.
So, Ed, we've talked about a lot of stuff tonight, but I usually like to leave us with, something at the end to, kind of sum things up. So I think for tonight, we've mentioned a lot of different things that you can do for mindfulness. What are your top 3 things that people can do to bring more mindfulness and mental wellness to their life?
Yeah, I've recently been reading some articles on kindness, and it talks about how being kind to people actually will give you an endorphin boost too. It's not only the person you're thanking, but it actually gives you a boost too. And I think about it in our society now, how we have, we get groceries delivered to us, we get Amazon delivered to us, we do our banking online. Again, I'm an older guy. I'm in my 50s. So when I was younger and I had to run errands, I had to go see the bank teller. I had to go talk to the cashier at the grocery store. So you had these interactions that were just part of your day, right? And having those kindness interactions, that was connection, right? So you were able to connect. Thank you for helping me out. And they would, hey, thanks for bagging the groceries. That was that connection that we had. So I think when it comes to mental health, mental wellness, having those connections, being more deliberate, that greeter at Walmart's out there digging every day. hey, how are you? And doing that and taking those couple minutes to talk to someone, interact with someone. Hi, how are you? Can I help you? Even if you get blown off, it's you're making an effort. You're going to get that. I'm doing what I need to do. And I think that's what can really spurn this connection, and being deliberate in that can really, and it's a bonus to everybody involved. So just kindness, seeing people for people, and in our daily lives can really lend to everybody's mental well-being.
That's awesome. And I can actually see how that would work. I've looked at it from kind of another angle before in terms of gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's still me interpreting input to me rather than me putting that output to the world as kindness. And I think that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it does, it works. I mean, just, seeing, having that extra acknowledgement of somebody, that it's not just that typical transactional thing we have, but that tiny step above can really make your day and somebody else's.
Awesome. Well, it's about time for us to wrap up. Ed, thank you very much. I'm going to put you in the green room for just a minute while I wrap things up.
All right. Thanks again, Eric. It's great talking with you.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for what I think is probably one of the most important episodes that we've done here on the live stream. Yes, the topic got a little bit heavy at times, but I think we talked about how mental health affects your productivity, it affects your attitude, and it can affect your physical health as well. So please, please take your mental health seriously. Take wellness, take mindfulness seriously, because we're all in this together. Everybody wants to see everybody succeed. That's what this community is about. I know that a lot of my friends that are in this community, some of them have been here tonight on the live stream. Dawn, Degley, thank you for your comments. Thank you for your questions. Really do appreciate that. And guys, we're going to have some more live streams coming up. Degley is going to be on the live stream. We've got the topics picked out. We're ready to go. I just don't know when it's scheduled yet, because I should know that, and I should have been able to tell you that tonight, but I forgot to look it up. I apologize. We are on the countdown to ChannelCon. So CompTIA ChannelCon, August 1st through 3rd. If you haven't registered yet and you can go ahead and register. Use the code EANTH23 and you actually get your registration for free. There's going to be a lot of great stuff there. We just produced a playbook for MSPs on a lot of different topics that are very top of mind. In fact, we just kind of wrapped that up today. It's looking great. A lot of great information. So be there, and if you can't, join CompTIA. There's just a lot of resources about that. And I know this sounds like an ad, but it's true. There's a lot of resources. There are a lot of things to help you as somebody who works in the IT services industry. And of course, we are coming up on 8 p.m., which means that, what does that mean? That means it's time for Uncle Marv's IT Business Podcast. So stop watching me, go over there and watch Uncle Marv, because that's what I'm going to go do. So anyway, thanks again for being here tonight. Really do appreciate it. See you at CompTIA, or we'll see you on the next live stream. Thanks a lot. Talk to you later.